like that when I was a kid. We just did what, I just stumbled along.
Yeah, no, I mean,
was a
I think,
problem. Yeah.
there probably was a table where the jocks sat together or whatever. I guess you had something like that, but it wasn't as I joke in the book that we're not too far really removed from in the future. Perhaps they'll be naming cafeteria tables after former popular
Oh yeah.
students
Yeah.
hallways. This is where they used to gather. I mean, it's really not that far removed from that because they are treated, especially when you look at the. And I have documented cases in there of several instances of groups of football players raping girls,
Right.
and not only getting away with it, but having the communities, because they seem to come from very successful football programs, and there's that winning mentality. America loves winners, and it doesn't matter how you win, just win, baby. That's always been the mentality. They don't mind cheaters either. Leo DeRocher, one of the all-time bullies, said, nice guys finish last, and everybody kind of shakes their head and agrees, and that shouldn't be in any kind of sane society that nice guys finish last. Reasonably they should be finishing first, but we know they don't. And in those high schools where they have powerful high school football programs, especially when these incidents have happened, the entire community, not only the student body and the administration, back the football players, but the communities do. The families get ostracized. In some cases, they have to move away because of the harassment. I mean, we have instances like that happened a while back where a bunch of high school players assaulted and sexually, stuck broomsticks, terrible things,
Yeah.
which is this happens a lot, to a mentally retarded girl. And the community took up for the football players and tried to guilt the mentally retarded girl as if she'd been asking for it. And this happens all too often. I've been in contact with the mother of one girl who fortunately didn't kill herself, although she's tried subsequently several times and hasn't yet, thankfully. But she was raped, I think, when she was 13, 14, 15, something like that, by older high school football players. The entire thing was filmed, as many of these attacks are, but still it doesn't seem to have an impact on the jurors and the judges. And they got slaps on the wrist. And again, they were football players. And her family, I know from the mother, talks about it all the time, where they were, in one case, they had a bunch of rabbits that were skinned or something, and the carcasses left in their car. They were, she lost her job, and they said, well, it just was coincidence, And this is awful that this happens, because what does it say about us as a society? That the community, and again, it's that winning thing. I doubt if they would have had quite the same desire to defend these football players. First of all, if they hadn't been football players, I don't think. If they had been a bunch of geeks from the audiovisual squad, I don't think the community would have defended them. And if the football program had been terrible, if they'd been a Northwestern type or something that hadn't won for a long time, maybe it wouldn't have been quite as overt in terms of how they supported them. But we love winners, and that's why coaches from the sporting world like Bobby Knight, Woody Hayes. It used to. I mean, if you know anything about these guys' backgrounds, I mean, they couldn't exist in any other industry. I mean, with their incredible lack of impulse control, violent tendencies. I coached youth sports for many years. They couldn't have lasted in the youth sports world because, Bobby Knight's throwing things out on the court, assaulting players, Woody Hayes ending his career by punching a football player during a game. And, of course, this extends to the players, the violent tendencies there where they get caught assaulting women, especially over and over again. And it's almost always a slap on the wrist. They never face the consequences that, John Doe would for sexual assault. And the feminist groups, as they do in that politically correct world, they don't go there with football players. They typically, you had the Ray Rice situation, which was unusual. I'm not sure what happened there, why that triggered a reaction. But in most cases, they don't. They're very quiet about, even football players that are accused multiple times of sexually assault. Jameis Winston, for instance, he was the number one pick in the NFL draft, and he was accused twice of sexually assaulting women during college. It didn't affect him at all. He was still the number one pick. And I have in the book about how they joked about, how he gave the Heisman stance. He basically gave a stiff arm to the legal system when he was found not guilty. And so it's something I think that we need to face. But I know I'm going against all of society basically, because this is, and it's kind of tied into capitalism in a way, the winner take all, we hate participation trophies, that stuff. But that's the way most people feel, and I think it's all really associated with bullying, and it's why it happens. And I know I'm in the minority here.
I get like survival of the fittest, and
yeah.
And people who just glamorize that type of toughness. And we're Americans, we're tough,
Yeah.
It's just and usually the people who have that attitude anyway. It's,
Well, how many movies have you ever seen where, going back to the early age of Hollywood, with Jimmy Cagney and Humphrey Bogart and Edward G. Robinson, all the gangsters. How many of those leading men like Gary Cooper, that I love, people like that. How many movies did you see where the leading actor didn't punch somebody out at one point in the film?
Right.
It's all, and there was usually the leading lady actress there to fawn over him and be happy he did it, and like suddenly be attracted to him, and that kind of thing. And then of course it graduated into the 50s with the the Marlon Brando, the Wild One. What are you rebelling against, Johnny? What do you got? Where he's just suddenly angry about everything. But there was that toughness, and women especially were told over and over again in these movies, whether it was him or Elvis Presley, then the early Elvis, James Dean, where this is suddenly the kind of bad boy. This is the attractive guy. You don't like the nice guy next door. He's boring. And I think that really that had an impact. And I quote from several articles that I found where you have even feminists promoting this nonsense, where the bad boy is the one you want. And I think that's a bigger societal thing, because I think that explains a lot of the prevalence of spousal abuse and lots of other things. But so it's kind of a bigger issue. But I think, again, it's born in that media that constantly portrays these bad boys as the this is the desirable this is what you want. You don't want the nice normal guy and the guy that's going to treat you well and not beat you. Instead, you want that danger and that drama. And I think that's what so many unfortunately so many high school girls, teenage girls, and usually the most popular ones, that's what I think they like seeing that, and they enable when they see the jock stuffing a nerd in a locker or whatever, just by their participation, by giggling or then walking off arm in arm with the guy. What does that say? That where if they were shamed for doing that, first by the females, the popular females, and especially by the authority figures, if they actually held them to task, but they don't, and invariably they make excuses for them, and that's why I think why the problems continue, because we're not looking in the right direction. Instead, these so-called anti-bullying experts, who I found almost to a person really side with the bullies most of the time, they work with the schools, and I think I hope to prove in this book that the schools are the problem, because they're the ones that have the social hierarchy and the ones that enable through their auto. There was one girl I talked to on Facebook that I didn't include in the book, but I'm going to use her story. I'm going to write an article before the book comes out about personal anecdotes from people. But she was, when she was in high school, she was talking about at one of these award ceremonies, that they have in the auditorium, and that involve teachers, administrators. She was given an award for least likely to succeed. And, it still impacted her decades later. Because she didn't know she was called up to receive an award, and then when she's on stage, that's what she's given the award for. That's horrendous to do that to a teenager who, nothing is more important to teenagers than the respect of their peers. But there was another thing, like a kid to get some kind of ghetto award, the AHA award or something. It's just, this is unbelievable that teachers participate in that, but they do. And I quote extensively from internet forums and people that have written who talk about, waking up still screaming as middle-aged people from what they experienced as youngsters. And, to tell them to shake it off, which is what invariably they do. Oh, that happened. We didn't mean to. They were just having – no, they weren't having fun. They were having fun at your – you weren't having fun. And for instance, we don't tell somebody who was sexually assaulted at 12 or something – We don't tell them to shake it off. We understand that's a traumatizing event and it's going to impact you as an adult, but we don't look at this bullying stuff, and just especially when it's enabled by the school system like it was for that girl. We don't look at that in the same way, and I contend that it's every bit as harmful emotionally as a sexual assault would have been.
Yeah, in some ways probably worse. Donald, you have a radio show on a Truth Frequency Network.
Right.
Truth Frequency Radio, TFR.
Right.
And it's Friday nights, 5 p.m., right, Eastern Time?
Yes, 5 to 7 Eastern, yep.
I got a guest for you. I'm going to recommend this guy to you. His name is Kevin Soling.
Okay.
It's Kevin with a C. And he's written a whole book and has a whole thing about the public school systems, the public education system, and the public schools. He's totally against it. And he's right up the alley of what you're talking about here. Fascinating guy and a lot of other things, too. He did that film about the hole in the head, about trepidation, where they drill the hole in the head.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Send me send me his name again or whatever, or his contact info. That'd be great. Sure.
You two would talk about this. Forget it. You're right on the same page with this. I'm serious.
Glad somebody out there. Glad I'm with someone.
Well, you know what? He's behind this new film too that came out, Hail Satan. So some people are saying he's a Satanist. I mean, I don't know if you want to be on the same page with this guy.
That's what happens. Usually the people that agree with me are in those kind of flat earthers. People like that. That's what I end up getting. That's my crowd. People have been targeted. I get these people.
Let's not get into that. But it's fascinating too, because you're talking about the films and they punch out the guy. It's also too when you're debating with these guys about gun issues, and they'll say, "Well, you don't want to have a gun. You're going to stand by while your wife gets raped if you don't have a gun." And they think that they're going to be carrying his gun around, and they're going to be John McClane, where they're going to save a whole building full of people, and that their ex-wife is going to come back to them. You know what I mean?
And ironically, and that's the thing, just as prevalent, probably more prevalent than the hero punching somebody out, and now increasingly in modern, and now because we're having to empower women, now we have the 98-pound supermodel punch out, a 250-pound man in every movie. Right. Somebody's punching out somebody else. Again, it's just the lesson there that's drummed into the head, even though as parents, you're a parent, I'm a parent, and I always taught my kids that, fighting isn't a way to resolve stuff. That's what you're supposed to. I thought that's what other parents were teaching. But how do you do that when every television show and every movie, the literal punchline is that, this is how you resolve differences. You punch. And I don't know how that, and same thing with guns. If you're, and this is the same people that Hollywood, is constantly blasting the NRA, and saying people are gun nuts. But how many movies don't have the hero again brandishing guns? I mean, I'd like to see a gun-free film. I don't think it's possible in Hollywood to do it. I mean, it's constantly who has the biggest gun, and we know in Hollywood tropes how you're going to be if you're a big enough name up on the cast, it's going to be pretty hard to kill you with a gun. It might take 100 shots, where if you're just an average guy, boom, you're dead. One shot. But these are just like Hollywood tropes. But it's inconsistency there because they're preaching one thing. Hollywood especially is preaching from that typical social justice warrior mindset where, we seemingly they want peace and love, but they don't. They end up supporting every war. They end up having armed bodyguards around them and starring in films where they're throwing that weapon around, like more than any nudity you see on film for sure. And of course, they're punching somebody out. It's their first, if you walk up to somebody you don't like they're saying, boom, you punch them. And I just think that's a disastrous message to put out there, but it ties in with I think that's why we see this stuff happening. You get combined with our win at all costs mentality where winning cures everything. As long as you win, doesn't matter necessarily you circumvented the rules. And again, I saw that even at the youth sports level. I saw coaches cheating, and the more successful they were, the more likely they were to cheat, and the more likely every parent was going to support them because they were winning, even at that level.
Yeah, we've seen that too. Coaching my daughter's team, we've seen the other team cheating. And you don't really want to call them on it either. It's embarrassing in front of all. Yeah. You just kind of let it go because it's embarrassing for the kids too. We got to take a commercial break. We're here with Donald Jeffries. You can check him out every Friday night on Truth Free